So we're back in the Mishneh Torah, the RAMBAM's Mishneh Torah. This is Sefer Ahavah, the second book. This is that's the book of love. We're in Hilchot, Tefillin, Mezuzah, and Sefer Torah. So Perek Tet, chapter 9. A Torah scroll should not be made with its length greater than its circumference, nor with its circumference greater than its length. What is its correct length? With gavil, so a full grain parchment, which is thicker, 6 hand breadths, which are 24 finger breadths, measured with the thumb. With cloth, outer grain parchment, which is thinner, the length may be more or less than 6 hand breadths, as long as the length is equal to the circumference. So too, if the Torah written on gavil is less than 6 hand breadths, but one wrote in small script, or is greater than 6 hand breadths, and one enlarged the script so that the length is equal to the circumference, it is also optimal. The measure of the lower margin is 4 finger breadths, of the upper margin 3 finger breadths, and between columns 2 finger breadths. Therefore, at the beginning and end of each sheet of parchment, one must leave 1 finger breadth plus the amount needed for sewing, so that when the sheet will be sewed to the next, the distance between columns throughout the entire scroll will be 2 finger breadths. Enough parchment must also be left at the beginning and end of the scroll to roll away the staff. All of these measures are for the preferred mitzvah, but if one detracted or added to them, it does not render the scroll unfit. It's not pasul. How can one plan that the scroll be of equal length and circumference? One can begin with equally squared off parchments, each parchment 6 hand breadths wide, all in equal measure. Then these parchments should be rolled up into a single, tightly packed bundle. Sheets of parchment should be added and tightened until the circumference of the bundle is 6 hand breadths, which is the width of each parchment. A thread of fine wool wrapped around the bundle is used to measure the circumference. One then fashions a straight roller, 40 or 50 finger breadths long. 1 finger breadth in the roller should be divided into halves, thirds, and quarters, so that it can be used to measure half a finger breadth, a quarter finger breadth, and other fractions. Each parchment should be measured with this ruler, so that one knows how many finger breadths there are in each and every parchment, so that he knows how many finger breadths there are in the length of the entire bundle. Then one takes 2 or 3 additional parchments to check the size of the script, writing 1 column with each. Being that the entire parchment is 24 finger breadths long, it is obvious that the length of the column is 17 finger breadths. For one must leave an upper margin of 3 finger breadths and a lower margin of 4. But the width of the column depends on the script, whether it is thin or thick. So too, the number of lines on the page depends on the script. For a space, the height of 1 line must be left between each line. After writing the test column, as one finds satisfactory, one should measure the width of the column with the finger breadths on the ruler. Then one should add the additional 2 finger breadths which must be left between each column, and should then calculate how many columns will fit in the rolled up bundle when using script of the size he used in the test column. This way he will know the total number of columns that will fit on these parchments. He should then check how much of the Torah he wrote in the test column, and then should estimate using the text from which he is copying. He should then calculate if the entire Torah will fit and the number of columns that he can write in the bundled parchment. If he can, then he should use script of this size for the scroll. If, according to his calculations, there would be space for more columns than he needs, he should enlarge the script so the number of columns that will fit is fewer, using another column as a test. And if, according to the calculations, he will require more column space to complete the Torah, he should use smaller script so that he will have more columns, testing on another column. So too, column after column, the testing should continue until the calculation matches. Once one has ascertained the width of the columns and the size of the script, he can begin writing on the bundled parchment. Each parchment should be divided into organized columns by ruling it, according to the width of the column that he used in his test and worked out in his calculations. When 3 or 4 finger breadths remain in the parchment, next to the final column in the sheet, he should leave over 1 finger breadth plus enough to sew and trim the rest without concern. For at the end, additional parchments will be added on the rolled up bundle, equal to all the additional parts that he trimmed from each additional parchment. This does not need to be calculated in advance, for the size of the script will ensure the correct number of columns. So too, if one wishes to make the width of the scroll greater than 6 hand breadths or fewer than 6 hand breadths, he should use this method of calculation, and the length will be equal to the circumference, no less and no more, as long as he does not err in his calculation. The width of the thumb mentioned in all these measures and in all other measures in the entire Torah is average size. We have already precisely determined its measure and found it to be the width of 7 average barley corns placed tightly next to each other, which is equal to the length of 2 barley corns placed next to each other loosely. The handbreadth mentioned in all situations is equal to 4 of these finger breadths, and each cubit equals 6 handbreadths. In the Torah scroll which I wrote, the width of each of its columns is 4 finger breadths, while in the Song of the Sea and the Song of Ha'azino, the width of each column of them both is 6 finger breadths. The number of lines in each column is 51. The number of columns in the entire scroll is 226 columns. The length of the entire scroll is approximately 1,366 finger breadths. The additional 6 finger breadths in the calculation are for the first and final margins in the scroll. The parchment we used for them were made of ram skin. If one wishes to write using these dimensions or reasonably close to them, whether less a column or 2 or 3, or more by a column or 2 or 3, there is no need to go to the effort of making a new calculation, for the resulting length will equal the circumference. No fewer than 3 columns may be made in each parchment sheet, nor any more than 8 columns. No fewer than 3, no more than 8. If one happened upon a sheet 9 columns wide, it should be divided into 2 sheets of 4 or 5 columns. 4 and 5 columns. When does this apply? To the beginning of the scroll or in its middle. But at the end of the scroll, even a single verse in a single column may be written on its own individual column, and is then sewn along with the rest of the sheets. When sewing the parchment sheets, they may only be sewn with sinew of kosher, domestic, or wild animals, even those of whom died without ritual slaughter, or who were mortally wounded, just as tefillin are sewn. This is a law transmitted to Moshe at Sinai. Therefore, if they were sewn without sinew, or with the sinews of a non-kosher animal, the scroll is invalid. It's pasul. Until the seams are removed and resewn according to the rule. When sewing the parchment sheets, one does not sew the entire sheet from beginning to end, but rather leaves a bit on the top and a bit on the bottom without stitching, so that the sheet will not tear in the middle when it is rolled up. 2 wooden staves are made, one in the beginning and one in its end. The parchment left at the beginning and the end is sewed onto the staves with sinew so that it can be rolled up on them. The staff must be at a distance from the script on the column. If a parchment sheet of the Torah scroll was torn between the letters, if the tear is 2 lines long, it should be sewn up. If it is 3 lines long, it should not be sewn up. To what does this apply? To an old scroll, where the gall used in the tanning is no longer evident. But if the parchment is still recognizably treated with gall, it should be sewn even if the tear is 3 lines long. So too, if the tear is between columns or between words, it should be sewn. Any tears may only be sewn with sinew of type used for sewing together the parchment sheets. And one must take care with any tear that no letter is missing, nor has the form of any letter been changed. Chapter 10, Perek Yod. It follows that there are 20 things, any one of which renders the Torah scroll unfit. If any of them was done to the scroll, it has the status of a single book of the Pentateuch, which is used for teaching children, and does not have the sanctity of a Torah scroll, and may not be used for public reading. They are, 1. If it was written on hide of a non-kosher animal. 2. If it was written on the untamed hide of a kosher animal. I think it means untanned. Untanned hide of a kosher animal. Or if it was tanned without intent for the purpose of a Torah scroll. If it was written on the side inappropriate for writing the flesh of gavil, so the full parchment, the full grain parchment, or the hair side of cloth. So if it was written on the side inappropriate for writing the flesh, meaning the flesh side of gavil, or the hair side of cloth. Okay, 5. If it was written partly on gavil and partly on cloth. 6. If it was written on duhustot, so inner grain parchment. Number 7, if it was written without ruled lines. 8, if it was not written in indelible black. 9, if it was written in other languages. 10, if it was written by a Gentile or any other unfit person. 11, if the names of Hashem mentioned in it were written without correct intent. 12, if even one letter is missing. 13, if one added even one letter. 14, if one letter touches another. 15, if the form of a single letter is flawed, either rendering it completely illegible or making it similar to another letter, whether the flaw was in the original writing, whether due to a hole in the letter, or due to a tear, or due to a smear. 16. If one distanced two letters or wrote them too near to each other, causing a single word to appear as two, or two words to appear as one. 17. If one changed the form of the portions. 18. If one changed the form of the songs. 19. If one wrote any of the other scripts in the style of the songs. 20. If one sewed those sheets with anything but sinew of a kosher animal. Other stipulations are for the preferred manner of the mitzvah, but do not render it unfit. So, a kosher Torah scroll must be treated with extreme sanctity and great honor. It is forbidden for a person to sell a Torah scroll even if he has nothing to eat, even if he has many scrolls, and even to sell an old scroll so as to buy a new one. A Torah scroll may only be sold for two purposes: to use the proceeds to study Torah, or to use the proceeds to marry a wife. That is only if he has nothing else to sell. So a Torah scroll which wore out or became unfit should be placed in an earthenware vessel and should be buried near a Torah scholar. That is how it is hidden away. Cloth covers of Torah scrolls which wore out are made out of shrouds for a met mitzvah, so a deceased person without any resources. This is how they are hidden away. A container that was made for a Torah scroll in which it was actually placed, cloth covers in an ark, the raised table on which the Torah is placed while being read, even if the scroll is kept inside its container during the reading, and so too a bench prepared for placing the Torah scroll upon it, and upon which the Torah was actually placed, all have the status of sacred accessories, and it is forbidden to throw them away. Rather, when they wear out or are broken, they must be hidden away. However, the diet upon which the person holding the Torah scroll stands, and the tablets which one writes in order to teach children, have no sanctity. So too, silver or gold, pomegranates, and similar ornaments made to decorate the Torah scroll have the status of sacred accessories. They may not be used for mundane purposes unless they were sold in order to use the proceeds to purchase a Torah scroll or a book of the Pentateuch. It is permitted to place one scroll on top of the other, and it goes without saying that they may be placed on top of individual books of the Pentateuch. Individual books of the Pentateuch may be placed on top of books of the prophets or scriptural writings. But books of the prophets or scriptural writings may not be placed on top of individual books of the Pentateuch, nor may individual books of the Pentateuch be placed on top of a Torah scroll. All sacred writings, even books of the law and Agadah, may not be thrown away. Amulets, so parchments with holy names, which contain matters of sacred writings, may not be brought into the lavatory, the bathroom, unless they are covered with leather. One may not hold a Torah scroll in his arm and enter the bathhouse or a lavatory or a cemetery with it, even if it is wrapped in cloth coverings and placed inside its case. One may not read from it until distancing oneself 4 cubits from a grave, or from a corpse, or from a lavatory. One may not hold a Torah scroll while naked. It is forbidden to sit on a couch upon which a Torah scroll is placed. One may not have marital relations in a room containing a Torah scroll before removing it, or until placing it inside a container and placing that container within an additional container which is not specifically designed for the storage of the Torah scroll. But if it is its designated container, even 10 containers, one within the other, have the status of a single container. Alternatively, so like the ark, there's a container inside of a container, right? If there was Alternatively, one may construct a barrier 10 handbreadths high if he has no other room, but if one has another room, he may not have relations before removing the Torah scroll. All who are impure, including women in their menses and even Gentiles, are permitted to hold a Torah scroll and to read from it. For words of Torah do not become impure. That is, as long as their hands are not filthy or dirty with mud. Rather, they should wash their hands and then they may touch it. So anyone who sees a Torah scroll being carried must stand up before it. All must remain standing until the person carrying it reaches its place or until they can no longer see it. They may then sit down. It is a mitzvah to designate a place for the Torah scroll and to respect that place, to glorify it excessively, for that which is written on the tablets of the covenant appears in every Torah scroll. One may not spit in the direction of a Torah scroll, nor reveal his nakedness in its presence, nor stretch out his legs in its presence, nor place it upon his head like a burden. One may not turn his back on a Torah scroll unless it is 10 handbreadths higher than him. If one was traveling from place to place while carrying a Torah scroll, he may not place the Torah scroll inside a sack to put it on a donkey's back and ride on it. But if one is afraid of thieves, it is permitted. If there is nothing to fear, one should hold it to his bosom, close to his heart, as he continues riding the animal. One who sits in the presence of a Torah scroll must sit with serious demeanor, with awe and reverence, for it is a faithful witness for all who come into this world, as it states, and it shall be there for you as a witness. And one must honor it to the best of his ability. The early sages said, one who desecrates the Torah, his body will be desecrated by all creatures. While one who honors the Torah, his body will be honored by all creatures. Blessed be Hashem who has assisted us. And that is the end of the laws of the Sefer Torah. Next is Zit Zit. So thanks for watching.